And they were like, Natalie, this is getting really dangerous now. They didn't think I was going to survive or the baby was going to survive. Morning sickness, it's like, this isn't morning sickness. If I could have jumped out the window at that point, I would have, but I didn't have the energy. But I was on 5 different anti-sickness medications. My blood pressure dropped so much that I just passed out. Just sickness, it's just sickness. I come back around after having 3 lots of adrenaline, fluids 3 times a week. It was almost like I was institutionalised. Can't continue this pregnancy. The baby's heartbeat had gone. I kept thinking, I'm not even going to survive.
This podcast contains discussions of severe pregnancy complications, including Hyperemesis Gravidarum, and other distressing topics. Some content and imagery may be upsetting to some viewers. Welcome to the Silent Struggle podcast with me, Michelle Chan. Today, we're hearing from someone who went through the toughest pregnancy complications, Hyperemesis Gravidarum. This isn't just morning sickness. It's constant, severe nausea and vomiting that can last for months, sometimes the whole pregnancy. It takes a toll, not just on the body, but your mind too. And today I'm joined by Natalie. Her condition became so severe that she needed a PICC line just to receive nutrition. She spent over 2 months in hospital fighting to survive each day. Through her story, we want to show how serious Hyperemesis Gravidarum can be and why better awareness, care and support are urgently needed for people who are suffering from it. So let's begin. Before we start, I want to thank everyone for listening to this podcast. It means so much to me. So I've got one small favour to ask. Can you please hit the subscribe button? I don't have a production team, so it's only me working tirelessly behind all this. So this would help me to bring more episodes of Silent Struggles to you. So if you could help me help this podcast by hitting the subscribe button, that would mean the world to me. So let's get started. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you so much for being here to tell us your story. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, about your pregnancy, and when you actually thought there was something wrong?
Yeah, so it all started quite quick, actually. It was in the beginning. I just found out I was pregnant. I was quite shocked. I wasn't expecting to have any more. I thought I was going through my menopause because I was 42 and, anyway, so I found out I was expecting and the sickness started from like 6 weeks. So I started being sick and I thought, okay, you've had other children, Natalie, this is morning sickness, but something was just different. It was different. It wasn't like fleeting where you would feel sick on and off throughout the day and stuff. It was continuously there. And when I wasn't being sick, which was constantly, I was waking up through the night being sick as well as, through the day. So I was just feeling sick constantly. I remember going to the doctors and saying, I need some anti-sickness. This is getting ridiculous. I can't eat nothing. I'm starting to feel really faint all the time. It was really early on that I actually went into hospital to the early clinic. They sent me, the doctors, I went for a doctor's appointment. They sent me straight up to Addenbrooke's because my blood pressure was so low. Addenbrooke's is our local hospital. It's a fantastic hospital, thankfully. So yeah, I went up there and they did bloods and they said that my hemoglobin was really low. I was really anemic. It was there that I passed out for the first time and they put me on a drip and they kept me in hospital for the night. So I had to keep going into the early clinic. So I'd come home and I just couldn't get on with my everyday life. I had a 3-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old autistic son, and a couple of teenagers, and everything just had to stop, basically. My mum had to do more. My partner had to not be at work at the time because I was pretty much in bed. I've become really, really weak to the point where I was in and out of hospital constantly. Early on, I started bleeding. So we were going for early scans, to check if the baby was okay. There was quite a few occasions where I thought we were going to lose him. But equally, in my mind, I was like, I don't know if I can do this pregnancy. I ended up getting emergency therapy because I got so depressed. I was like, I can't continue this pregnancy. I lost my dad a year in March and the baby was due around his birthday. So everyone kept saying, oh, it's a sign from your dad, it's a sign from God, you know, you're meant to have this baby. And I said, how am I meant to have this baby? I don't think I'm going to survive. Like, it was, nobody seemed to understand just how ill I was. I would stand up and I would pass out. And just even going to the toilet, I mean, I couldn't even get out of bed at some stages. So I was continuously taken to hospital. It got to around 16 weeks when I finally said, okay, we will continue this pregnancy. That was after lots of therapy, lots of doctor's appointments, lots of support and help from family and friends saying, you know, we've got this, we're going to help you with the children and things like that, because I'm in hospital having like going on drips and things like that, and I was under the early planning, you know, early clinic, and I was having fluids 3 times a week. So I was having to have fluids 3 times a week. And it got to a point where I was so dehydrated that my veins stopped working. They basically collapsed, and I was so dehydrated that they couldn't even put a line in. So they said that I needed to have an emergency PICC line put in. And I hadn't heard of one of those before until I was explained that a lot of cancer patients have them for chemo. So it's so you can have a continuous line in, so you can constantly have fluids put in, so you don't, you know, have cannulas all the time. So I was a little bit nervous about that, and they took me down for that, and it was a horrible experience. Actually, it wasn't pleasant. And what it is they put a line in, and it goes all the way into the top of your heart. Yeah, so that was a bit of an experience, but once it was in, it was in, and it made it a lot easier to all the time. So you'd have this continuous lining, so they could constantly like put your fluids in, put your anti-sickness in, because I couldn't keep any of my anti-sickness tablets down that the GP had given me, so I had to have everything done intravenously. So 3 times a week I was back and forth from home, well, basically from my bed. I was put in a car, taken to hospital, and if my levels were really low at the time, they'd keep me in for the night or a couple of nights to get some more fluids back in me. I was really anemic, so I had to have 3 iron transfusions, and they were talking about a blood transfusion, and I didn't want to have a blood transfusion while I was pregnant unless it was life and death. I didn't want to go through, you know, because of the risks of that. It got to, so I fell pregnant, I found out in the summer. It got to October, and by October it was really, really severe, to the point where I would be going in for my fluids, and instead of staying for a couple of days, I would be staying for a week, and then I would coming home for a couple of days, and then I was going in for a week. And then January, when January come, Christmas wasn't the same. You know, I tried to enjoy it with the family, and I was, you know, I was home, thankfully, but I wasn't able to eat the nice foods that I would normally eat. I couldn't keep anything down, basically. I was given some shakes to try and, like, with nutrients and vitamins and minerals and things in, but even those wouldn't stay down. So yeah, so come January they said, we think you're just going to have to stay in now till you've had the baby.
How many weeks were
Um,
you?
and so at that point, I was just, it was 10 weeks before actually that so he was due on the 12th of April. Um, so yeah, so the start of January. So I said, no, I can't do that. And I kind of refused, which, you know, I shouldn't have. And I wanted to be at home because of my 3-year-old and my 10-year-old autistic son. So I was still continuing to go backwards and forwards. And they were like, Natalie, this is getting really dangerous now. And it was the last 2.5 months where I was pretty much in hospital, other than a day of a week. And then the last 5 weeks, it was continuous until I had him. And I had him at 36 weeks. But rewinding back from that, I was having bloods taken continuously from my PICC line, which would block where they were using it so much. I was on continuous strips all through the day, all through the night. They wanted to put a NG tube in because I was losing weight. And I didn't want to do that because my mental health was really declining at that point. So with the hospital, there was people coming and going, having their babies all the time, but obviously I was still, only in my 30s of the weeks. And they kept saying, oh, you're going to have him at 39 weeks. And then it was, no, you're going to have him at 38 weeks. And no, you're going to have him at 37 weeks. And then different doctors were saying different things to me. And I was getting all confused. If I could have jumped out the window at that point, I would have, but I didn't have the energy. There was like all the COVID and various things going on at the hospital. So my children couldn't even visit sometimes. And I was living in hospital and my kids were at home. And thank goodness for phones, because I would call them in the morning before they went to school and then after school. So I was trying to be on the phone to them as much as possible. But some days I was so weak, I just slept. So I just slept. Like every day just went into each days. It was a blur. On better days, they allowed me to come out of hospital for a few hours to have a baby shower, which was amazing. See family and friends for a few hours. And I belong to a Christian church, so they were all there and they set it all up for me. But by the time I got back to hospital, I was gone. I literally was put straight on drips, straight on medicines, and I slept for like nearly 2 days. I was exhausted. My body was exhausted. It was shutting down on me. I was having AKI alerts, which is when my kidneys were starting to fail. Um, yeah, it got really quite touch and go. Other than that, the baby was doing okay. It got to a point where some days I was so poorly, I was just sleeping. I got really, really depressed, actually, really depressed. And as I said, if I had the energy, I would have jumped out the window, but I just didn't have the energy to move. But I just didn't want to be here anymore. I was thinking, like, God, if you wanted me to have this baby, why am I feeling this unwell? Why is this happening? I'm not going to survive, and then I'm going to leave all my other children. Yeah, it was just such a hard time. And I was, so guilty. I felt so guilty on my kids that were back at home, because I couldn't be there with them. My daughter was only 3, and she was like, "Mummy, when are you coming home?" And I was, 2.5 months, I was not at home, for the last part, and I was missing so much. And weekends they were able to come up to visit me, unless there was a COVID thing or a sick bug going on at the hospital at the time. So yeah, it just everything become a blur. All days rolled into one. I was seeing all these different consultants. They were all telling me different things. They all had different suggestions of what should happen to me and what was going to happen next, and all the different medications that I tried. I mean, I couldn't even tell you half of the stuff that I had, because it all become a blur of, we're just going to inject you with this now, we're just going to try this one, we're just going to do this. And it was just like, at the end, just do whatever, I don't care anymore, I just want to die. And then it got to a point where I started losing weight, and they said, look, you're coming up to 36 weeks, we need to induce you. We don't want you to have a cesarean, because if you are having to have blood, it could be quite dangerous for you, because my blood levels were so low. My hemoglobin was so low, like I couldn't stand up to go to the toilet. People had to help me. I had to use the bed pans. So before they were going to induce me, they said, we're going to boost you up with fluids. So I had 7 hours of fluids and medications, I don't even know what, to give me as much strength as I could before going through labour. That all went a little bit Pete Tong as well. So they took me over, and even though I had my PICC line, I still had to have a cannula fitted. So they come to fit the cannula, and I told them it wasn't working, but they managed to get one in. But I said, look, it's not working. I don't feel like it's happening. So they broke my waters because I was already 3 centimeters dilated. I think my body had already had enough and had started itself off. So I had this cannula in my hand, and it had a drip in to try and bring on contractions. And I kept saying, it's not working, it's not working. You know, I feel like it's going into my hand. And all of a sudden my hand sort of bloated up where it wasn't going into my veins. My veins were so small and weak that it was just going into my skin. Then they said, look, my blood pressure kept dropping, like was really, really dropping. Somebody came in to try and give me an epidural, and I'd had an epidural before with previous pregnancy, but it just wasn't, even the epidural wasn't working. It did something where my blood pressure dropped so much that I just passed out, and they all apparently all ran in the room and was giving me adrenaline. I had my partner and my nearly 17-year-old daughter in with me, so I think that was quite scary for them. I come back around after having 3 lots of adrenaline, and they said, look, you know, we might have to take you for a C-section. Let's see what's going on. The room, there were so many different doctors and things coming in all the time. They were like, we've got blood on standby if you need it now. You know, they put me right in a room next to theatre just in case I needed to be whisked off for an emergency. My blood pressure kept dropping down. I kept thinking, I'm not even going to survive this labour. Then another anaesthetist come in, and they managed to get another one in here because of my PICC line was already being used, and the 2 lines were already being used. They were like, that's not enough, we need to get more in you, we need more fluid in you, more anti-sickness, more adrenaline, because my blood pressure kept dropping. So another anaesthetist come in, and they managed to get a line in here, and also in here. So I had 2 in here and my PICC line with my couple of lines coming out of it. And then thankfully the epidural started to work. The contractions started to come on, and then I thought, oh, I'm okay. I feel, you know, like the anti-sickness is working not too bad. I'm still feeling very, very sick, but this is manageable. And a few hours went on, and I thought, right, I'm so tired, I need to try and sleep. But then I heard alarms going off, and I remember looking to the midwives and saying, you know, oh no, somebody's emergency alarm's going off. And they said, Natalie, this is yours. The room's about to fill up of people. Just brace yourself. So the next thing I know, there's about 8 different people running in the room. My blood pressure had dramatically dropped, so I was starting to feel like I was going to pass out. The baby's heartbeat had gone right down, and they were getting ready to whisk me off, and all of a sudden they said, the head's there, push. And honestly, I don't know what come over me, but I pushed with every bit of me, and he came out quick. But he wasn't breathing. I was, yeah, not good. So they gave me more adrenaline. But then he was born. Yeah, that wasn't even the end of the journey then. We had to stay in for 11 days after that, and then we were able to come home. And it's now 12 weeks that Harrison is, and every now and again I still feel sick, so I still have some anti-sickness for if I need it. But thankfully I haven't been sick, which was the most strangest feeling, to not be sick when you've been sick for so long.
Would you say that after when Harrison is born, all the sickness is gone?
So I was able to eat, which was really strange. So they brought me some tea and toast, and they gave me a big bowl ready. And I ate my toast, and I wasn't sick. I wasn't sick at all. I felt sick, but I wasn't sick. And that was the first time in months and months and months I hadn't been sick. And I still haven't been sick. It's just every now and again I get the fleeting, you know, feelings coming. So I still have. But I was on 5 different anti-sickness medications, so many different drips I was on, like vitamin drips. you name it, I had it at the hospital. I couldn't even tell you half the names of them because it was just constant through the day, through the night, checking my blood pressure. My blood pressure at some point dropped to 39. And they thought I was like, yeah, there was a few moments where they didn't think I was going to survive or the baby was going to survive. It
Wow.
was a really, really difficult time. And when I come home, it was weird because I'd not been at home for so long. I was at home and I felt alien in my own home. It was almost like I wanted to go back to the hospital in some ways because that's what I knew. That's the life I knew, where I had my routine. I had my room, you know, my four walls. Even though I couldn't wait to come home, when I got home, it was almost like I was institutionalized and I had to have some therapy. To get back into normality. It was really, really strange.
So did you get help with your mental health?
Yes, yeah,
Deacon.
perinatal team, and talking therapies. Yeah, thankfully I was in a really good hospital that listened, because I've heard stories where people, you know, are just, it's not recognised. This is the problem. Hyperemesis gravidum is not, a lot of people don't know about it. I didn't know about it until going through it myself, really. I'd heard of people having bad sickness, but you don't get it. You know, when people say, oh, you know, I had a bit of morning sickness. Oh, yeah, you know, I felt sick for a few, you know, and I thought, yeah, no, this is a different level. Yeah, this is beyond sickness. It was debilitating. It was your life was on pause. Your life was on pause. Your family's life was on pause. Um, just from one day to the next, you just didn't know what was coming next. You know, I'd have the odd good few days at hospital. I'm saying good few days, but days where I was awake. Days where I was able to communicate with people, and just feel like I wasn't dying some days, you know, because the rest of the days you just thought you was going to die, and you wanted to die at some points because you felt so unwell. Your body felt poisoned. It was just, you were fighting yourself constantly, whether you wanted to be alive or you wanted to beat it. I think it is something to do with a dad, because they say that the dad has like control over the placenta. I think
Yes.
it's been proven now, because once the placenta was out, I wasn't sick. I still felt sick because my body had just got used to, you know, feeling so sick, and it took quite a while to pick back up again. Like, I'm still under the hospital now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I still have to have like blood tests and things because my hemoglobin was really low, like my blood levels were really low. My body took such a battering that it's still trying to recover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I
That's
couldn't.
really good that your hospital actually do care for you and
You
actually.
know, rehab, honestly, and this is the thing. I think it got to that turning point where I thought, when I was in hospital, where I thought, do you know what, this is awful, and you feel awful, but thank goodness that they look after you and that they care and that they're giving you these medications and
Mm,
stuff. Because if they hadn't, I don't think me and Harrison would be here. You know, um, they did so much for me, and they become like family. They were
oh,
literally my family, because I was there for so long. I was, you know, um, and they listened. They really listened. Like, they'd sit and hold my hand when I was crying, or, you know, and because like I'm Christian, they'd go down. We had there's like a hospital church, and they'd get the chaplaincy to come and sit with me and pray with me because I was at breaking point, like. And I
mm.
think, you know, it was my faith that kind of got me through it at the end. I thought, if anyone can help me, it's God. Other than that, you know, it's all out of my hands now. I just didn't know what was going to happen.
Did you face any judgment from people who don't understand the condition? And like, what kind of things did they say to you?
So, like, some friends were just like, "Oh, yeah, we had really bad morning sickness, you know," and like, "Oh, it'll pass soon. You're all right. It's just sickness. It's just sickness." And you think, just sickness. And I think it wasn't until, you know, the point that they realised just how poorly I was, where I'd stand up in front of them and just pass out on the floor. Like I fell and smacked my mouth and split my mouth open. And they just, yeah, realised just how poorly I was. But when people say, you know, morning sickness, it's like, this isn't morning sickness. This is a whole different illness. You know, it was yeah. So a lot of people didn't understand. I don't think it's their fault as such. I just think unless you've been through it or somebody very close to you's been through it, you don't understand. Some doctors aren't that great. I saw some doctors where they were just like, oh, you know, we'll just give you another anti-sickness. But then I got one that really, really listened, thankfully. And then my doctor now, I've kept them as my doctor. But yeah, you could see that they really cared. And thankfully Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, so we're Hertfordshire, but Addenbrooke's is our closest hospital, and it is the best hospital around. And they do, you know, they have a clinic for Hyperemesis Gravidarum.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, so they have like where people are going in for the drips and things. Yeah, it's very, very recognised, thankfully, at that hospital. But on like the Facebook group that I joined to, you know, because it's to speak to people that are going through the same thing as you, otherwise nobody understands it. And some of the people were saying, you know, that they've had such a hard time. So I was, you know, I suppose one of the success stories in the fact of Addenbrooke's is very aware of it, and takes it very seriously. And so, you know, in that sense, I'm blessed. I know it was horrendous what I went through, but I had the best of the best. You know, they took it seriously. They saw how poorly I was, and took it seriously. So I was looked after quickly. You know, from early stages, I was given the anti-sickness. I was put on the drips. They were looking into whatever they could do to help me. So
what helped you through those times when you felt like you couldn't keep going?
truthfully, family, God. As I say, so I was in hospital, I was in my four walls. So that is life. You're literally living in a hospital room. You have the staff coming in, you have a routine. Some days you're not too bad, and then the days where it's really bad, and you're so tired where you've not been able to sleep because you're continuously being sick. I had to have people come in. They got people to come in from the mental health team. So I had people come in from mental health team to sit and talk to me about it. And they really listened. You know, they really took it seriously how I was feeling, because the midwives kept coming in saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Because and I think like at one point they were near my door just in case I tried to escape, because I did tell them I wanted to jump out the window a couple of times, just so it would all end. And then because they knew I was Christian, they went to the chaplaincy in the hospital, and they came every couple of days, actually, the chaplaincy, and they sat on my bed and held my hand and prayed with me, which really uplifted me. So yeah.
And did you mention there's like Facebook group that you can speak to people who's going through
So
exactly the same
there
thing?
was so I went on to Facebook, and I found the HG group, and they're like, oh, I think they're all over the world, a lot from like America and stuff like that as well. And it was just so lovely to, do you know what I think the best thing was? Seeing the success stories, seeing the, hi guys, you're all going to get through it, here's a picture of my baby, because it felt so far away. when you were there, you know, you thought, I'm never going to get my baby, I'm never going to get through this times. And then you saw a picture of a baby and you'd known that person had been through such a tough time over the months, you know, where they would be like, I can't do it anymore. And, you know, and then all of a sudden they're like, it's so worth it once you've got the baby in your arms. And especially when they said once they've had the baby, they weren't sick. So that's really encouraging. So yeah, that group really did help, really helped me.
So what advice would you give to people who are struggling from hyperemesis gravidarum then?
I think you know your own body, so keep pushing. If your doctors aren't listening, get another opinion, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. Go to hospital. I know different hospitals have different, you know, whether you go to A&E or whatever, you make them listen, because it is real and it is hard, and you deserve to be listened to and get as much help and support as you can. Don't stay quiet, you know, speak to family and friends about things, join HG groups, because nobody knows what you're going through other than people that are going through it themselves. And it's so supportive, you know, to speak to people that are in the same boat as you, and just don't suffer in silence.
So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And you've done an incredible job by bringing him into this world. And you
Yeah,
should be so proud of that.
thank
And
you.
I know it must be really hard for you to actually talk about your experience, and because you're reliving it again. But
Oh,
you've done it, and your story would really inspire current HG sufferers. And it really does take a lot of courage for you to do this. And I thank you so much for raising awareness about a condition that truly deserves more attention.
yeah, it really does. It really does. Everybody needs to know about it, and it needs to be recognised for what it actually is. It's not morning sickness. Don't listen. You know, it's life changing. It's life changing, and there's so many people that do lose their lives and feel that they're not heard and can't take no more. And it shouldn't be like that. Everybody should have help and support.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this show. If you like this show, like what we're doing here, and you want to support us, the free way to do so is to hit the subscribe button. If you're struggling and you want to share your story, please check out the link in the description. I will promise to do my best to create awareness for the conditions that people are struggling silently. Thank you, and see you next time.